I thought a great way to end our time together this weekend would be to have you listen to one of the most accomplished international entrepreneurs that I've come across in Shanghai. And so I'm delighted that Carl Bro, CEO of Simon, will be our guest speaker this afternoon. So I was talking to you about two ways of developing network relationships, the effectual way and the causal way, right? The effectual way is where you tap into networks you already have. A causal approach is where you make a very deliberate approach to identify someone. And I would say Carl is actually in the latter category, because maybe 6 years ago, there was a group that came from a Canadian university, maybe Queen's University, the executive MBA program or something. In the pre-COVID days, we had lots of groups from foreign business schools coming to CEIBS for a 1-week China immersion. And I would always be asked to spend half a day with them to talk about entrepreneurship in China. So for 90 minutes, I would give a talk, and then 90 minutes, I would have a panel. And so because there was this Canadian school coming, I felt I should have at least one Canadian in my panel. So I approached the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and said, I'm a professor at CEIBS and I'm looking for a speaker who can speak about entrepreneurship in China. And they said, look no further than Carl Bro. So Carl is from the French-speaking side of Canada, and he is trilingual in French, English, and Chinese. He has been living in China for many years and has been a sort of a classic bridge between China and the West. I recall in that early panel when we met, he was talking about how he would help Chinese students go to Canada and the US for summer camps and stuff like that. But over time, he was then doing really cool things, bringing some famous Canadian acts into China, like Cirque du Soleil, and even some American acts like the Blue Men, and so on. And over time, of course, with COVID, like a lot of people, he's also pivoted and done some interesting innovation for the China market. So Carl has really a lot of experience to share, and I thought he would be someone great to hear from. So Carl, thank you so much for sparing time. In fact, during the Shanghai lockdown, he was very active in his compound, helping out as a volunteer, and recently got a certificate to appreciate that. But apparently, as soon as the lockdown ended, he got the hell out of Shanghai. So he's now in Shenzhen, joining us online from there, where he has also a big operation. So Carl, thank you for sparing time for us on a Sunday afternoon. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's always been a great pleasure. And it was, it's been what, 5 or 6 years already, right? So how many things have happened in the last little while? Well, very nice to meet you all. Just so you know, so I'm an engineer. I'll do a bit of my introduction, but you see the little Harvard picture on the front page here. I'm actually I'm a businessman and I run a business, but I actually do quite a bit of these presentations and guest lectures, and I actually am doing a higher education teaching certificate at Harvard, and this content is actually the content that I have to prepare part of my course. So as you are the student, I'm sort of also the student here. So I'll try to perform as well as much as I can to be able to do this well for you. Hopefully make it relevant for you today. So let me just get my mouse going. So today what we'll cover, I guess, well, of course, I'll try to attach as much as I can to some of the experiences I've had at Simon, and we'll introduce what the company does in a little while. But so I'll do a company introduction. I like to talk about going from being a champion, or if you want, to a manager. Champion meaning, say you're a great engineer, or you got great technical knowledge, or you can be a champion of finance or marketing, and how do you go from there to becoming a manager, which I think is the first step if you want to eventually become an entrepreneur. We need to talk about technology, right? Because one of the big disruptors, as you all know, is technology, and technology is bringing complexity. So I would say overall, if you cannot understand technology, you're not ready to be an international entrepreneur. I will talk about internalized, and then it's all things that lead to one another, right? Which is, if you're good at what you do, if you're a champion, then essentially you become a manager. Once you become a manager, then typically you'll be involved with technology somehow. And then if you have technology, that brings in international, if you want, because if you ever have a business dealing with technology, then either you will be able to compete internationally, or somebody else will come and compete and find you where you are. So then I'll go through some of the lessons, humbly, some of the lessons I've had as an international entrepreneur. I did a lot of mistakes. I'm sort of an old man. So I'll try to share maybe hopefully some things which are interesting there. We'll talk about China. You know, I mean, we're obviously in China, so maybe some of the things which might be more specific to China. And then I'll talk about me, which is really talking about you as well, because I always, more recently, I tried to finish most of my presentations talking about mental health, protecting ourselves, which I think is all, you know, very important in the context of being successful in the world we live in today. So, well, very quickly on myself. So I'm an engineer from Canada. I'm also I have a board member certification. I'm a board member of a few companies, typically companies that are involved with technology or involved with international, specifically China. I speak, I'm originally from Canada, Quebec, so my first language is French, then English, and I also speak and read and write the Mandarin, Chinese Mandarin. So I'm also an associate at CDL. I don't know if you guys know CDL. Creative Destruction Lab is the largest incubator in Canada. It's also one of the largest in England. It's the one at Oxford University. Whoops, it's the one at Oxford University. And then I own a home in Shanghai, and I've been living in China for 11 years. So I spend, you know, typically I would spend about half my time in China, half my time outside. But of course, now with travel restrictions, I've been spending essentially all of my time. Okay, so that's for my long-winded introduction. So let's talk about some of the things I like to do. So, you know, what does it mean to go from being a champion to a manager? I always found, because I'm an engineer, obviously, I became a manager, and that transition from becoming a manager from being an engineer or a technical expert could be, like I was mentioning, could be any type of expertise that you have. That's a huge transition, you know, and if you guys are following a course on entrepreneurial, international entrepreneurship, then at some point you have to be managing stuff, right? So you have to become a manager, and that's a very big transition you have to do in the way you do things. And the way I like to explain, the way I've lived it, and the way I actually teach this at the Canadian Council of Engineers to future engineers who want to become managers, is the first step is you really have to be a champion at something. You have to be the best at something. It doesn't matter what you are, what it is. In terms of, if you want to have that, you know, if you want to be a good manager, I always think that good managers come out of people who are able to really fine-tune one specific skill. Could be anything. You could be the best person using Excel, it still works. You can be, of course, you can be a product designer, you can be good at financing, you can be good at marketing, but you have to have at least one thing if you want to become a manager, or certainly an entrepreneur, that when the time pick comes up in your office or where you're working, people turn to you. Okay, oh, I want to do an equation on Excel, turn to you. You're no doubt the best person to be able to do that in your office. So if you want to become a manager, my first advice to you is become the best at something. Choose it, study it, practice it, make the mistakes, and become the very best at it. That's the first step for me. The second step, once you've really mastered something, is you have to start to managing people, right? So the first step, it's sort of the first step is becoming a manager. It's like, well, you know, so we have Julie over there, and Julie, she's very good at doing marketing, and she's been our main marketing person for 5 years now. Let's make Julie our marketing department manager. So all of a sudden, Julie has to change her role from being an expert in marketing to managing people who will be doing marketing, right? And that's a big transition. It's the managing people. So it's a people, it's not so much about people skills, I would say. Of course, that can help. but it's more about learning how to delegate. You know, it's just putting the hat that if you're managing people, it's still you who's responsible for the result of what's about to happen, right? So what happens is, as you're delegating a task to somebody in your team, then you have to think, okay, does the person have the ability to do this task I'm giving him or her? Does him or her have the resources? Am I giving them the resources? Do they have the motivation? Did I give them a clear objective? Am I following that very well? You know, is there feedback from me? So all these things still is your responsibility, but then, you know, that role of not doing things anymore, but essentially motivating and having other people do the things that you are managing. That's a big transition. It's like, essentially, it's no hands. You have to keep your hands together and find a way for your team to be able to do things. So that's the first transition. That's the second, I would say, step if you want to become an entrepreneur, which is the second step of also becoming a manager. The next step, I would say, is that some point you need to learn about budgets, right? And that's also the same time you learn about saying no, because sometimes you want to do things and maybe it's the best thing to do and you feel really good to do it, but you just don't have the money to do it, or it doesn't fit in this year's budget, or for some other reason, you're now stuck in an environment where you have to have, you know, not just essentially doing tasks and managing people and, you know, having sort of a feel-good atmosphere in your team. Now you're stuck with a bottom line and you have to make a profit. And then so that's another transition you have to learn and prepare for, which is the way of that you have to manage budgets. You know, and if I'm talking to engineers, typically all of these things are outside the scope of what we're learning in school, right? We're learning how to build bridges and, you know, whatever it is we're learning. I don't remember that well, but we were certainly not learning about managing and building budgets. So that means that we also have to go back and learn and make mistakes, but that's all on the path of becoming an entrepreneur. At some point, you know, you made it. So you're good at managing people, you're managing budgets, you're saying no at the right time, you're making money. And then somebody is going to say, well, you know, Carl, you're ahead now. You decide, you make the strategy, you decide the plan, you make the business plan, you tell us what to do. So, and that's the first time as an entrepreneur that you're pushed on the top, and they say it's lonely at the top, right? Sort of working in a vacuum there. And that's another skill set that you have to learn, right? Which is the one of essentially working in a fuzzy environment, the sort of fuzzy front end of projects, right, where things are actually not defined. You have to make decisions on very little data, and you have to make very important decisions for which are going to impact you as a manager, your company, and your whole team. So, but that's a different mindset to be able to essentially work out of vacuum. One of the things I like to say also, I find for a manager, which is very important, is that your mindset is different, right? You're not, it's a little bit like learning in school. You know, you start by, you know, the alphabet, and which would, I guess I wrote it here as two examples. One is from knowledge and concepts, right? You learn the knowledge and the concepts, but as you become a manager, you're supposed to have mastered those pretty good, especially in one of those areas, the one where I said you're the champion at, right? But by being champion at least one thing, that gives you a pretty good idea of how to be a champion, and it gives you a pretty good idea of other people can be champions in other things. But you're no longer working at that level. You're doing analysis, you're doing evaluation, you're creating, right? If you're doing strategy, you're creating. So you are, I'd say you really are working in a different sort of way of thinking and doing things, which I think is interesting. I would think you guys are in the MBA class. You've probably done GMATs, right? So if you do a GMAT, you know that big part of GMATs is data sufficiency problems. Remember those? Where it doesn't matter that you find the solution. You don't need to know, 2 + 2 =. You don't need to give the answer. You just have to know. You have enough data to be able to solve the problem. And that's the manager's perspective, right? It's the one of, so you're not solving things. all you're making sure at the same is that you're just worried about sufficiency. Do I have sufficient staff? Do I have sufficient money? Do I have sufficiently clear objectives? So you become from a doer to person who is essentially just focused on sufficiency. And this is my own talking, but I talk about that being at the second level. So you move to that level and you don't go back down. You just stay there and just sharpen that tool of being able to be the person that your team and your company can rely to, that you never fall in a hole where somebody did not worry enough about having sufficient money, sufficient team, sufficiently clear objectives to be successful. Your responsibility is sufficiency. So moving on to a technology, one of the things about becoming a manager, certainly international manager, is that at some point technology comes up. So I put a bag with welcome. It's the welcome gift of becoming a manager, is then you have to understand technology. So technology, used to be very specific niche. If you go back 30 years, IBM is doing a technology and computers, but now technology, as you know, is disrupting everything. And I'm not just talking about your product or your service, because that's getting disrupted as well, right? So you have to first and foremost be sure that your product or the service you provide is incorporating, not to say all the technologies are out there, but certainly make a conscious decision in terms of how much technology needs to be there to be able to do that well. But the problem with technology goes further than that. It's challenging your business model. It is totally destroying marketing, right? I mean, it used to be a thing called digital marketing. Now it's just marketing. Everything is digital, pretty much, right? Or I would say maybe 80% of everything is digital, right? So if you want to be successful now, even for things in marketing and any aspects of the, technology is no longer sort of the R&D team and engineering, and then they're doing these things in the lab. Now, to be able to be successful, you have to understand technology. As a manager, you have a responsibility to really understand technology, because it's everywhere, right? You look at the stories of even very, very traditional companies. I don't want to mention names, but certainly in our own business, the way we've been doing projects, and we can talk about this after in the question period. It's all about technology ultimately, even more so in China, right? So you have to. So my point is, you have to once you made it, so you went up the steps there, and you're at the top level and you become a manager. Your next big step is to keep learning, especially technology, because that's going to be impacting everything that you do. And then the other thing is that technology is fueling complexity, and that's a problem. Used to be technology would be there to simplify, right? But now, for some reason, in the last few years, technology is not fueling complexity. So things are not getting more simple. They're actually getting more complex. So you want to go to the grocery store, you want to find information about something. Used to be, okay, you just take the car and go. If you want to find, now, you can buy online. Online, there's different platforms. You can go, it's how you go there, how you choose I don't want to get into a random example, but just to say that technology is fueling complexity. So even more so, you have to be a champion at the technology to be successful. If we talk about internationalization, and by the way, the device there is the pop-up-in device. I'll talk about this in 1 minute. That the one that Shami was mentioning. So this is actually a product we created. That's our own IP. Actually, we have a patent for that. Because most of you, I think, are in China, that if you go into restaurants or bars in China now, just about everywhere there's those phone chargers, right? That you can essentially pay, I think it's 3 RMB per hour, and they pop out and you can charge your phone. This is it's a new product that we developed, that we patented. So it's on the table in the restaurant where you go. We were pilot running in many establishments in Shanghai up until the lockdown. And we're going to go again this fall. This time no longer a pilot. We're going full in the fall. So the idea is you have a little screen there, and you're charging your phone for free. So you have this device on the table, you can charge your phone. You don't need to pay anything. And then the business model is that the screen that is there is essentially an advertising model, right? So you have people who are paying for advertising on the device, and you just use it to charge your phone for free. We don't pull any data from the phone. And then I don't know if any of you have seen it, but for example, we were piloting in Popeyes. So as you were going in Popeyes downtown Shanghai, you would have all of these on the table. So you see the Popeyes logo is on every table. As you approach, then there's a radar inside. It's called an elliptical radar. It detects that you're approaching, and then the Popeyes logo on the device goes into a transition, says, well, welcome to Popeyes, and then it shows the specials of the day, explains how things are, and then it goes to a QR code, and then eventually you can order directly on the device. And then after that, then it goes to advertising mode, and the revenue is advertising. So on well, of course, this is a course on international and entrepreneurship. So we have to talk about internationalization, and then especially on the constrained resources, which I think is the most interesting model, right? I think especially if you want to start your own company, or if you are looking to do something very innovative and creative, typically you have constrained resources. Coca-Cola, they did not have very much constrained resources when they came into China. And they're working at a very different set of parameters. If you're trying to internationalize a new product, a new idea in a startup, typically you have very large constraints, so you have to take care of those things very well. I would think, in my experience, some of the things which are the most important to manage is what I would call the intercultural and interdisciplinary interfaces in your company. So, for example, what's an what is that I call intercultural interface? It's hard to pronounce, but it does have a meaning. So I'm saying, for example, say you have a headquarter in the city, for example, in New York City, okay, and you have an office here in Shanghai, or you have a partner that's even better. Say you have a partner that's based in Shanghai. So you have a team A, team B, two different countries, right? Two different cultures, probably, right? So you have those two, and you need to do some sort of collaboration. Well, at some point, somebody from A will talk to somebody from B, and those two people, the people who are sitting at that table are on the phone or on Zoom, those people at that interface are very, very critical to the success of your international venture. So what sort of people do we need? Well, I found with experience that there are people who are very natural at, sort of being able to operate very well in that environment. There are people who naturally are curious about understanding other people's cultures, are patient, they're listening, they try to see the issues and things from the other person's perspective. I call that cultural intelligence. So if you're working internationally, you look at those sort of points of intersection that you have between the teams. It also happens, you sort of have the similar situation actually between the disciplines. So sometimes if you have engineering talking to marketing, that there's another interface there. Those two people are also important, but that's not the discussion today. So when you're selecting, for example, you have a target for acquisition, for example, in China, or you have a big potential project that is starting, and you need to, that person you're sending, you have to be very careful how to select that. And I'm not just talking about somebody who's nice and smiling and sort of. There's intelligence in the way some people manage international this type of relationship, and you have to find those people. I would think in this group, talking English, doing an MBA in China, I would think there's a good chance that many of you are naturally culturally intelligent. So when you have that problem going up, make sure you find the right people. On the contrary, I've seen situations where you have maybe a seat in New York office say, oh, we'll send somebody tough on the negotiation table. We'll show them how it's done, things like this, and those that creates problems. If it's not short term, at some point it just doesn't work. You have to have communication flow. You have to have people who are solving problems. So that would be my first advice to you if you're dealing internationally, is to spend attention on those interfaces. The other challenge that you have if you're working internationally is funding and bank financing. So what happens at some point if you're in constrained resources, say you're a company in Germany and you want to enter the Chinese market, for example, well, somebody has to finance that, right? So you turn back. So if you speak to your investors back in Germany, in my example, then they'll say, well, it's China. We're not too familiar with that market really. So I'm not sure if we'll help you for that. So you go see your bank. They say essentially the same thing. Well, it's China. I don't know. Then you go to China and say, well, let's try to find something in China then. And China say, well, it's a German company. It's essentially like you're always a stranger, right? You're trying to do financing. So there's a big challenge on financing. So from the beginning, as you're going international and you're working on the constrained resources, you have to be aware that one of the big challenges you will have is how to finance the whole thing. So it goes back to do a good planning, and it's going to cost money. Don't make the mistake of thinking, well, it's hard to finance. Well, we'll sort of make our way through. We'll sort of it's a lot of risk. It's a lot of money. You have to find a way to do it. There's people who've done it before. There's a lot of places that can help, but I can tell you, it has to be managed. One of the things I would say if you're dealing with internationalization is don't pay too much attention to social media when it goes outside reasonable boundaries. It's I don't need to spend too much attention on that, but I'm sure you would imagine that somebody like me, doing business we do mostly business between England, Canada, China, and USA. So, constantly ask for their opinion about what do you think about China, this and that, or USA China relationship, or trying to stay within the realm of things that you really believe that are really important to you. If you drift off into these sort of contentious areas there, it doesn't help the business. It doesn't help anybody. One of the things I would like to also tell you from experience is that most people will tell you, to do business in this other country, for example, from USA to China, the context is very different there. The business practice, the law is different, but actually, aside from the fact that the language is different, and you may have other superficial differences, when you really dig into what's going to happen, it's actually very similar. You're building a business, you're supposed to have a good product, you're supposed to have a good positioning, you're managing teams, you have a budget. So don't be put off by what I would think are mostly superficial differences. For example, we have lawsuits in China, so we get sued, we sue when projects sort of go wrong. So I was always thinking, oh, wow, a lawsuit in China, that's going to be very different from, say, a USA or Canada, but it's really not different at all. I find that, most the way that the things were being prepared, we won lawsuits, so there's no sort of, I think it was fair to us in that example. So don't make it more complicated than it is, right? Just study well. And don't think that things are so different because they're in a different country. The language makes it look very different, the cultural sort of packaging of it all. But in actual fact, it's not that different. Try to rely, the next thing I would like to say is try to rely on what's already known as much as possible, right? You're not going to be the first if you're going to come into China to do a product here, or if you're in China and you want to go elsewhere, a lot of people have done it by now. So try to study, find examples, speak to some people who've done it before. And I would recommend not to do it alone. So it's sort of a similar example is that once you find the people who've done it before, it's good to keep them close and try to avoid making some mistakes. So my last, my big thing really on doing business internationally would be cultural intelligence. So try to be culturally intelligent and try to manage your interfaces very well. Some of the lessons I would like to tell you as an entrepreneur, of course, I don't want to make it bigger than it is, but many people's because we made it successfully, of course, through the COVID, right? Many businesses did not, and actually we're stronger even now than we were when we came in. And people are saying, so how did you do that? You know, what strategy did you do, or things like this? Honestly, it was very conservative. You know, the pivots that we did, the big ideas that we're thinking we'll do things completely different, actually, those did not work so well. The best pivots for us were very conservative, sort of like, okay, what are the big customers? Which ones are the most likely to be successful and make it through? And then focus on them, stay close to them. We did have some, serendipitous things, like for, sort of serendipitous being something that happens that is positive, but it's essentially totally out of luck. For example, the fact that we were doing gaming chairs is really serendipitous, because that became, of course, a very big business. I think it's times 10 since the beginning of the pandemic, but that was just luck there. So in the end, it's still about understanding.
Carl, sorry, I didn't catch that. What did you say was a business that became big?
Is when we're doing the gaming chairs, right? The chairs that are used by gamers.
Chairs.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, because people were staying at home, so they were looking for something to do, so they were playing games. So and then at some point they bought chairs. So in the end, I think what happened, the lessons I had in the last few years was really sort of boring, right? It's just stay close to your customer, understand what you're doing best, sharpen your tool. Take care of your best customers, take care of your business network. Of course, I think it was very important, especially because there was a lot of situations where we could not move, a lot of restrictions to travel. So as a business person, it was important to stay active on social media, keep people aware of how things are going, that you were still alive at least, and then. To me, I'm not so much a networking type of guy. I sort of like to do, I guess I'm a bit of an intellectual, but it's necessary, especially in business and being an entrepreneur and in any context to develop a network. So you have to find sort of a network method or something that helps you do marketing that can become a habit and that fits your personality. For some people, it's very natural to go out and networking events and make friends. For me, it wasn't. So I had to find other ways to do it. Includes, for example, what we're doing today, which is like giving conferences. I would like to talk a little bit about something that annoys me about young entrepreneurs. The dark side of young entrepreneurs is I'd like to talk about the rock star entrepreneur, right? So the rock star entrepreneur is the entrepreneur that is just starting, and there's just so much impetus now on you're doing great and it's a great innovation and you got your seed funding, and then you're the 25 under 25, and then you're doing so well, things like this, that at some point this sort of over gratification that is there creates a bit of a distortion in what I see in entrepreneurs, especially at the beginning, when they're oh, is that it? Wow, we're really successful, but actually they're not even selling anything yet, right? So at some point you have to be careful. The other thing is I would like to be, as you're studying, for example, our cases, or you're reading books, or you're learning about other things, always be very careful about what is called hindsight bias, right? The hindsight bias, and that's referring to the little article that you see there, right? So hindsight bias, you most of you may know, but just in case you don't know, is that if you look back at something, right? If you're studying a case study, or you're looking at another example of something that happens in the past, but you're looking at it in hindsight, it always looks more structured and simple, and essentially you draw the bad conclusion in terms of what actually really happened. Typically, entrepreneurship and success is difficult. It's not linear, right? And then it's not going from getting a seed funding to being the first page on the newspaper, and then that's it, you're successful. It's a long road. So when you're looking, for example, this example here, which I think is interesting. So it says, essentially somebody said that the Apple iPhone is a bad idea. So of course, in hindsight, you would never think that, right? You would think, no, wow, iPhone, that must have been really cruising from the beginning, or Tesla, right? Oh, wow, that must have been from A to B to C and everything. But of course, those stories are all very difficult. So my point is, as you're starting, don't get into the mindset that things are going to be linear and easy, and especially don't get too entitled when you start to hit the early successes, because it's just the beginning. Don't make the mistake sort of believing your own marketing and even your own social media, and sort of losing sight of the problems you're trying to solve. And then a little bit like I said at the beginning, if you're being an entrepreneur, your goal is to build something. And then but then you read the business books, and it's all about buzzwords like you have to be destroying, and you have to be blitzing, and you have to be disrupting, and you have to be, I've even heard people say, if you're not breaking something, there's something you're doing wrong, which is good. All those things they have meaning, right? They mean that if you want to create something new and really unique, at some point you're gonna be, you have to push your way through, right? But that's not the basis of being an entrepreneur. The basis of being an entrepreneur is to build something which I would say is beautiful, is durable, and is investable. That's your real objective. Your first objective is not to go there and break things. And your real objective, ultimate objective, I would say the first one is beautiful and durable. You're creating something which is relevant, and then it eventually becomes investable. Keep that in mind. That is more important to keep in mind, in my sense, than the destructing part of what you'll be hearing. So the next to last slide is, I guess, a little bit something about China. So what I feel is unique about China. By the way, this was a presentation that I saw a few months. I guess it was last year sometime. I thought it was interesting to see that this curve being human progress through time, and you are here, and we're sort of the inflection point where things are just keeping. Just totally accelerating in every aspect. This was actually an AI presentation, of course, AI being a huge disruptor. So, but already in China, the speed of technology adoption is already very fast. It's faster than most other countries. So that's a good thing and a bad thing in a way. It's a good thing if you have a new technology, you will have more early adopters. You have a better chance of sort of having your things on the table. But of course, the bad side is everything goes faster. So the competitors, they also move fast and aggressively. And I like to say that in China, if you're in Canada, Canada is a little bit slow. And so if you're successful in Canada, it's like you get the award, you're on the newspaper, and that's pretty much it, really. But if you're successful in China, you're a target. So day one, you're successful. Day two, you have 6 people who are good companies, well-funded, they're going after what you're doing and try to do it better. So you have to be in that mindset of, being able to react quickly and just be aware that that's the environment that you're in. Not good or bad, just different. The good is you'll have a lot of technology adoption, but then the bad side is that things will move quickly against you as well. Of course, now from what we see in manufacturing, there's a strong trend on what's called in China for China. So we're a manufacturer. What we're seeing at the beginning is we used to do a lot of manufacturing that was in China that was actually to be manufactured and then sold, exported, I guess, to other countries. We see more and more now manufacturing that is not imported anymore. For example, we have a customer there, an English customer. They make an oncology hospital type of equipment, and we manufacture part of the system. Used to be it was made back in England or Germany, I don't remember. And then, but now, for many reasons, travel restrictions were there, but there's also issues of customer support, of being better compatibility, of course, pricing, less transportation and things like this. So now they're very strong trend of manufacturing things in China for China. Not importing it to China, making them here and then selling them here. And I guess the role we play in such projects is that we have a good reputation for protecting their intellectual property. When I talk, you guys would know because you're in China, but I like to break down the perception that sometimes other people have of China. But I would say the 3 S's are very characteristic of China now. If you want to understand China, you have to understand that it has speed, everything has speed. Everything has scale, and then it has sophistication, which is something that you know, of course, here, but sometimes people from other countries don't really realize at what extent China as a market is already a very, very sophisticated market in terms of what it requires in terms of quality products, and then eventually sophistication in terms of service, delivery, and all the other things that are around essentially doing a business here. And then the other thing is also there's a decoupling going on. So with technology, so we see it more and more. So it's everybody knows that you can't use a Facebook in China. So there's the social media platform decoupling is already there. But and everybody knows that. But what I want to emphasize is underneath the operating systems, the underlying technology, sort of the what's under the hood, if you want, of technology is also decoupling. So that is also creating, I guess, more impetus towards doing manufacturing in China for China. And then my last slide, which I like to emphasize, if you want to become an entrepreneur, especially an international entrepreneur, that's a tough job. It's a very stressful job. Even more so in the current context of of COVID and so many things going on, and trade wars and travel restrictions. But it was already tough before that, so it's just even more tough now. So to be able to be successful, please take care of yourself. It's not easy. You're the captain of the ship, right? So you have to be your head at level, and you have to be there. But I mean, what does that mean? That means finish on time. Don't listen too much about the working 12 hours a day or things. Yes, you have to work hard, but at some point you have to take a break, do what you like, do exercise, eat the good food, drink the good wine, and try to have equilibrium between your personal life and your business life. Because if you come in at 9 a.m. on the Monday and you're already exhausted, you're not going to be a good manager and a good business person. I think, I like this quote, which I heard from a friend in England, which was, he says that he thought that the best thing to say that you need to do now, you have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable, right? Everybody's uncomfortable in some way now. So what you had to find a new comfort somewhere in that sort of disruption that's happening all around us. And find the things that what I say stabilizes you. So everybody, for me, for example, it's weird, but I like to study. So I study. I just take online courses. I read books. That just cools me down and gets me there. And then I, of course, do some exercise. So whatever it is, could be many things. You like to do painting. You like to do exercise. You like to whatever it is. But find something that really, when you're there, you can really go into a tunnel and disconnect. That's very important. And then and then yes, so like I was just mentioning, it's difficult to be a good manager if your private life is a mess. So manage your private life is also, and I'm talking about your family, your friends, of course yourself. You have to make sure that is as much as you can is in order to be able to be successful as an entrepreneur. Well, that's my WeChat if you guys are interested in adding WeChat. But that would be my 10 cents, I guess, and then we can go into a question period.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Carl. That was quite a tour de force. So a lot of experience that you've distilled down into a whole bunch of different things, including in the end, some very useful advice. And you're seeing this from both sides, the Western perspective and the Chinese perspective, and also very contemporary in terms of seeing the constraints that we're going through in terms of decoupling and so on. So people online, people in the classroom, any questions, anything you want to pick Carl's brain on? Okay, Connor.
So thank you very much for your presentation, Carl. I really enjoyed it. And I really, I guess, because I think I feel a lot of resonance with a lot of what you're talking about. Like I like to think of, at least I want to become, or I like to think of myself at least as someone who just enjoys studying in general. And I just kind of, actually, I was interested in the Harvard thing that you mentioned very, very briefly. Wait, what exactly is that you're doing? I think it's muted right now.
Sorry. So yeah, it's called a higher education teaching certificate. So I'm doing a certificate at Harvard. Among among a few things that I'm learning in my studying things. So I'm doing that. Yes. So part of that course. So the course there is just to improve teaching, as if I'm not a professor, but it's essentially it's university teachers taking that course, and you get a certificate, and then I need, since I'm not a professor, I needed to have, people typically will use the courses of the course they're giving, but I'm not. I'm a business guy, so I'm using this as my syllabus for the course. So I'll be tweaking it in the next few months to make it into something hopefully that can be relevant and useful. I'm thinking maybe I could eventually sort of, if it's become sufficiently well done, that I could maybe post it online or make it available to friends or something like this. So that's the plan.
Go ahead.
I also wanted to ask, because I mean, you talk about how like the way you kind of unwind or your stabilizing activity is kind of just studying and reading and so forth. I wanted to ask if do you often find like any kind of interesting, or I would imagine there must be some sort of interesting kind of synergies between what you're kind of doing in your kind of me time, your stabilizing time, versus what you're doing at work? Or do you find like those are kind of separate, or do you have like a lot of synergy between those two parts of yourself, really?
That's interesting, because I think there's a lot of synergy, and sometimes the synergy sort of surprises me, because sometimes you find the most sort of relevant and things that are useful to your company, not so much in the management book as you do in reading a history book from the 1800s or on something. Sometimes to just go totally outside of your environment gets you to think about, and then you're trying to draw some parallels, and you see some things that maybe you're learning more when you're sort of totally going outside the environment. So when I'm disconnecting, typically, aside from the obvious things, like I'm taking a course on disruptive marketing and things like this, which are totally sort of business related, but I also do things which are totally unrelated to work. So and most of the things I read are actually not related to work, but they become in a way after it. I'm not sure how to. I would like to draw maybe a specific example. Well, just going through the, for example, just going through the if we just stay on the Harvard course, for example. So there we're learning how do people learn, right? And it's metacognition, it's called. So cognition is learning, and metacognition is the process of learning to learn. And then as you're going through that and it's totally new for me. I never even heard the word before. But then as you see that, then I started to see some parallels between sort of business leadership and being a professor in the position of Shameen and the position of a manager in a department in the business. There's a lot of similarities there, right? You have to have leadership, especially now. You have to be inclusive. You are teaching, you are leading, you are helping. So I think that's a good example of what I want to say, is that sometimes when you read something or you're learning about something which is totally outside what you're doing, that gives you some very interesting inferences to be able to truly improve what you're doing in the business context as well.
Wow, fascinating. So thanks for asking that question, Connor. Nelson, I see your hand is up. Nelson's joining us online from America. So he's very dedicated. He's been up through the night, Carl, to listen to you.
Thank you, Nelson.
You're welcome. It's been fascinating. One thing that I like what you said about, not thinking about or not being distracted by these ideas of like disrupting or breaking or and entrepreneurship and business being about building. But do you think that there are certain industries, certain practices, certain products that deserve to be broken, deserve to be disrupted because they've maybe become so entrenched that there is no questioning them? We're sort of set in that way. And it takes someone thinking differently and takes someone sort of disrupting that to come to some innovation. I mean, do you think there is that's always a bad way to think about entrepreneurship?
Well, I think there's almost you can use the word disruptive, I think, almost semantically in two sort of totally different directions, right? I think one is a good one, and it's the meaning it is when you read business books, and there's another one which is a bad one. So yes, totally true that you have many places where you have to be disruptive and you have to do things. But I'll tell you the examples because I'm a mentor for some startups, through CDL, and sometimes I will see an attitude, because being a business at the beginning is it's very difficult, right? You don't have much money. You're trying to make it away, so to make it with the resources that you have, and there's a lot of sort of time pressure as well. So sometimes I will hear some things like, "Oh, it doesn't matter, the supplier. Let's not just pay him or her. We'll just move on. We're here for a bigger motive, and we have to break something." That's the wrong place to use breaking or disrupting. That's wrong. That's just wrong. You don't. The fact that you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to build something better, and you want to be disruptive, does not give you the right to go break another person's business and their team and their families that they're feeding, right? But of course, if you're thinking of your business idea, then that needs to be, then you have competitors, and then you're working into a context of, you're in the market, right? So there are some market rules there, which include competition, and you have some people there, and then you can be as long as you honor the market rules, you're not being dishonest, you do the things that are there, then go at it. You try to be you don't aim at being disruptive. You still aim at building something which is beautiful and useful and relevant. But if you're disruptive, then it's good because it's probably new, right? But you're not doing it in the way of you're just doing it in the way that you're building something beautiful, and on the way you're disrupting a market, and by respecting the market rules. You're not voluntarily trying to disrupt other people or destroy something else that somebody else has had. That in itself is not an objective. So, but that's the example I had is exactly the example I think is most relevant to answering the question. Is really the situation where you have where I heard that in a board meeting where they were saying, "Oh, it's a supplier. They're a big company. We don't need to pay them." You don't want to be that. You don't want to break that. That's breaking. That's not having integrity. That's not being the beautiful disruptive company that you want to be. That's just being that's not the right way to use it. That's my point.
To use just sort of a kind of like overused, I guess, kind of cliche example, but like Airbnb going after like the hospitality or the hotel, the big chain hotels, and wanting to sort of disrupt that model. Would you think that's sort of going after them in a bad way, or is it just like innovation, right? Like this,
That's fair. I think that's fair. Then you're working within market rules. They have the right to find ways to be better at their market, and everybody's trying to, essentially reach the same customer and with different offerings. And one of them is going to have an offering which is going to be just a better one, maybe more convenient, maybe more cost effective, for some reason more accepted by the customer. That's fair. That's sort of market disruption, and that's playing the rules, right? But but you'll see it when you are an entrepreneur, and you have to make those decisions, right? And then you will see. You have to make the difference between working within the market rules of being a disruptor to just being somebody who does not follow the rules and is breaking more things than he's actually building.
Here. That's absolutely great, Carl. Thank you. Dushan, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for the interesting presentation. I have a question. I would like to hear your personal opinion. How do you think about it? So Professor Chamin also in the introduction introduced you as a bridge between the countries and actually the nations. So I'm wondering, how do you feel and how do you see, people like you in the future, and what is going to be their role in the coming years ahead of us? So how do you see actually, companies like yours and people like yourself in the future? Will the opportunities become less and less? The need will become less and less, or you think there will still be the need and maybe even increasing in the future? So I would appreciate your view, personal.
Thank you very much, Susan, for your question. So what I felt personally in the last 2 years, so I do play that role. It's true, I think, especially between Canada and China, because I'm Canadian, right? So, but sometimes in other countries as well, but especially Canada. So your question is, what do I see those roles, those dreamers, those bridge builders, what's the future for them? Well, in the last 2 years, actually, because there's much more travel restrictions, there's been more requests for people or services like us, because used to be if a company from Canada had a big project in China, they would typically send their team over, and then they will go, maybe the team from here would go to Canada. And essentially they would they wouldn't need so much sort of people like us to be able to help out on their projects. But now, for example, because of travel restrictions, it's been quite good, actually. I'm in Shenzhen. I'll be in a BYD headquarters in 2 days from now. We're because we're part of the big plan. They have to go to Canada. I'm pretty sure they would not have called us 2 years ago. They would have just sent a big team there and then maybe even open an office, right? But now things are just so restriction difficult that I think that created some opportunities for us. Now, on the number of people doing this type of work, I think that number will go down. But I sure hope there's going to be as much people like us. Essentially, I strongly believe, that in this time of social media and sort of a lot of things in the media, which are of course, it's not interesting to read something sort of ordinary and positive in social media, even in the news, right? So typically, it's always things that are very negative. I think more than ever, we need people who are able to take those perspectives, and that's why I hope through the presentation I did today. That's why I'm trying to really enforce the fact that the world needs those people who have cultural intelligence, that build bridges, that diffuse business and even diplomatic issues between countries. I mean, we'll need those as much as we can. So my sort of I guess sort of candid answer would be hopefully there'll be more. We need people like that. So that's my honest answer. Of course, if there will be more or be less, that's something that is out of my control. But if you want to be one of those ambassadors, please do that, because I think that is very needed. Plus, it's a good place to be, because the media and all the bad news and the China bashing and the US bashing and all those things that happen in social media, when it comes down to actual business and communication and even to a certain extent diplomacy, it's not that bad. I mean, there's still a lot of things going on which are very positive, and people are cooperating between countries and between companies. So anyway, my point is, hopefully there'll be more and more. The world certainly needs them.
Great. Lynn, please go ahead.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for your sharing. You just talk about, manage the people, manage the resource, manage the budget. But I just wondering, how do you think about manage the crisis? As an entrepreneur, we must, face up a lot of crisis or uncertainties, especially in this kind of a world. A lot of uncertainties come up, every time moment. So I just, wondering, how do you think of the crisis and how we can deal with the crisis, if we meet?
Yes. I did an interview in 2020 on November, I think it was March 2020, when the pandemic, at the very beginning of the pandemic. Of course, in Shanghai, we were in total crisis. And then the interview was about, with the Canadian Business Journal, was about how to manage a crisis. So I'll try to draw from that. That was actually the most read business article that year in Canada. So one of the things, so if you're managing a crisis, okay, in general, well, of course, that's the ultimate test of leadership. So first of all, you have to be pragmatic. So you have to look at, okay, so you have to predict, for example, okay, what's going to affect my revenue? At that time, we were going to go in entertainment essentially to zero revenue. So then you have to look at your burn rate and your cash flow and your estimates, and you have to be very, very sort of pragmatic about how much money you have, how much money you can spend, and make the hard decisions as fast as you can, in terms of, it's not just about letting people go. It can be about making a deal with them, going back to 2 days a week, finding ways to do this. But just take a very sort of pragmatic screenshot of where you are about cash. And really the word cash is important. And then just try to make sure, because in business, if you don't have cash, you're not going to make it. That's your blood. That's what's running through your business's body, right? So cash is first. Then I found through the crisis that we had that there are some people in your team which manage well in crisis. There are those sort of natural leaders, the people that would say, there were people that would say, oh my God, what's going to happen? And they become stressful. And these people, we need to support, we need to help them. But all of a sudden you see in the team, and you've always expected that probably, but you see that there will be a few people that have a totally different attitude toward everything. And those people are your champions. Those are the people that you can use to maybe make a little a crisis cell, make a team. And these are the people who are going to be driving essentially your company as you make it through. They stay positive, they find solution, they are confident in everything. So you need to find those people and you stay close to them, keep them informed. And then the third thing is about communication. So you really have to constantly communicate. It's good for me. I like to talk. So I was in Paralyze, always talking, making meetings every 2 days on the situation, eventually every week, okay, here's the cash situation, here's where we are, here's the decisions we had. We made some, we were pushing some payments with some suppliers, we were talking to some customers, trying to get things going, sort of communicating as much as you can. So people, don't live in uncertainty, they know essentially where you are. My last point that I would like to say, okay, that's really just manager talking to manager. But Churchill said, never waste a good crisis, okay? So what does that mean really? Well, I'm sure you had his meaning, but what does it mean for me? Or the way I lived it? Is that I think in a business generally, you always have some processes or some things that you've always sort of knew, maybe they're not that good or not profitable. You should really do it, but for some reason, you've just never got down to it. But now you're in crisis. This is the time to make the big decisions. You've always thought that line of product was probably just borderline profitable and it's not going to make it. Well, just cut it. That's the time to do it, because people, your team, even your customers, everybody expects you to make those big shifts. They say, oh, okay, well, either, we're the pandemic hit, so of course things are going to happen like this. So take that chance, If you have some of the things that you've always hesitated, but the big part of you knows that you should do it, take the crisis as an opportunity to be able to make those changes.
Oh, really appreciate, especially the last point. Learn a lot. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you. That was really insightful. Yang?
Thank you for your sharing, Carl. So I was wondering, because you mentioned previous to the pandemic, you were bringing a lot of live performances to China, and that sort of was killed abruptly. So do you see that coming back, or do you, with the crackdown on the entertainment industry and other, geopolitical tensions, do you see that coming back? And I guess more broadly, like if that happens where something that you're doing is working and working well, and then suddenly for whatever reason that changes, how do you pivot and, find your new thing?
Yes. So we're deep down into those sort of considerations now with the Paw Patrol, right? It's a Wang Wang Dui, right? The big tour in China we did 3 years ago was the biggest tour in China. Now we have to make decisions. So we need to plan at least a year ahead. Do we make it come in what form? So I'll tell you some of the considerations that we have, and we don't have all the answers yet, but some of the directions we're considering. One of the things is we think that even if it's 1 year, 6 months down the road, we think to have a big team. I think that team is about 40 people. So 40 foreigners essentially coming in from Nickelodeon in the USA into China to be able to do a tour here that would last between 3 and 6 months. We think that risk is too high, because if we just see, it's going to be it's already a little bit endemic, right? From pandemic to endemic. But we see that for different, that if we say we have the 40 people here, we're going from one city to the other, and then that city has a few cases, so they shut it down. Then, we have this huge team, these big sort of burning cash team here all the time. So we're thinking that's not a realistic scenario. We're thinking more along the lines of trying to make a deal, and this is under negotiation. It's a little bit confidential, but not enough to the point that it would be improper to discuss it here. But trying to find, is there a way, for example, that we create a Chinese team? That would be much easier to manage. So instead of bringing 40 people in, you bring the 5 people who are, the coaches and the artistic director. We recruit locally, especially that they're Muppets, right? So it doesn't matter that much. And then we teach them that, they become professional, and then it would be sort of a Chinese version of the tour. And that's much easier to manage, because if the city shuts down, then you don't need to have them wait or go back to USA, right? They can maybe go back to their hometown or things like this. Certainly the cost of, if you want the negative cost of having sort of these disruptions inside the tour, much easier to manage. So long answer to say that I would think that the most likely scenario is that the exact way we were doing the tours, years ago, for example, Cirque du Soleil, I don't know if you saw Cruza in Shanghai, we had 117 people come in for that show in Shanghai. It's a huge show. I think for that exact scenario to happen, I think just now the cost, the risk associated with essentially not being able to operate because of the endemic, I think is too high. It's not going to happen. We're going to be at least 2 or 3 years where we're going to be working in one of 2 scenarios. The first one is the one I was mentioning, which is to maybe recreate a local team. It's still the original content. Maybe you can make it in Chinese, just to make it even more sort of local. You still have to keep the international feel to it, though, if you want to be able to sort of sell the high price ticket. But still, that's option 1. The option 2, which is much more sort of pie in the sky, but that we have to consider is there something we could do somewhat virtually, right? Of maybe we have the actual show is in Australia, but it's run on the big screen, and I don't know, even an IMAX theater here, and you have some sort of a way to be able to interact with the show, or maybe and maybe in the same time it's on Bilibili, so you make a little bit of revenue there. It's in Chinese, so try to find those sort of mixed media or new media type of solutions. But that I think is an unlikely scenario. I think what's most likely to happen is to have more and more internet. It's almost like the in China for China example I was giving for manufacturing, sort of transposed into entertainment, where the in China content would actually have to be sort of not made, but essentially based on a China-based team. I think that's my best answer.
Great question, and very, very interesting answer. Yeah. Any other questions for Carl? Please, Aldo.
Thank you for your sharing, Carl. I wanted to ask, first of all, I wanted to ask the point number 4 of the previous slide, if you can go through it one more time, please. And then I wanted to ask you, as an entrepreneur, I guess the most difficult time for you was the beginning, when you founded from scratch the company, I guess. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any suggestion if someone wants to start a new company? Do you have any suggestion to have let's say, a smooth start?
Okay, so we go to the 4th point here, which is it's much more difficult to be a good manager if your private life is a mess. What I want to emphasize is the fact that to be a successful manager, you have to take care of your family, you have to take care of your parents, you have to have a private life, you have to, do sports, do the things you like. Because if you're a manager and entrepreneur, you have to push that a little bit, right? Because there's just so much to do, and the pressure is very high, and the stakes are high on yourself. But you have to hold that wall as much as you can. If you sacrifice that, at some point you have nothing. Because if you don't have a good, if you made some sacrifices where you're never home for dinner, you're always on a business trip, you don't make room for your family and your personal life, they're sort of losing interest in you, or that's going to affect not just, of course, your private life by them is a mess, but then that's also going to make you a bad manager, because you go into, what the example I was giving is you come into the office at 9 a.m. and on the Monday morning, you want to be fresh and fighting, right? To be able to solve problems and be open, and you're managing people, right? So you want you want to be able to have the mood where you're able to help and find solutions. But if you come in already in a mood where, the weekend has been difficult and you haven't managed that part of your life well, then it's going to be a bigger problem. On your second question of the advice I would have for sort of making it easy at the beginning, right? Actually, I will answer the question, but I would like to say first that for me, the toughest was not at the beginning, actually, was really when we had the onset of COVID at the beginning of 2020. Because, we were a pretty big company. We had huge fixed costs, coming in every month, a whole story in a building downtown Shanghai, a factory in Shanghai, a factory in Shenzhen, offices in other cities as well. So we just had that huge sort of fixed cost sort of there, right? And then, entertainment, the sales essentially went to zero. And then for a while, even all the manufacturing was a bit of a mess. Of course, we couldn't go into the factory, so we couldn't manufacture. So anyway, I think that was the toughest challenge for me. Going back to your question in terms of, I guess, in general, if I would have any advice as how to start, well, let me think. It's very specific to the different situations. I would, I think would just go through proper preparation, find the business that you really are passionate about, I think, so that it's really, you're just following. I mean, I'm saying things that other people will tell you, but I think it's true that if you have very passionate about what you're about to set on as an entrepreneur, is very important, because that makes the whole process much more motivated, and you're more likely to seek information about it and sort of really go deep into it, as you should if you want it to become your business. Study before you start, understand about I'm not, depending on your background, I would say as much as you can before you start, try to know that to run a business you need to understand about I don't want to miss my departments, but say certainly finance, marketing, sales, HR, operations. So maybe let's take those 5, right? So you have to have some sort of an understanding of those 5, right? So as I was mentioning in the beginning, I would take for granted that on one of those 5, you're already a champion. You're already the guy people turn to when it comes to that topic. So, okay, 1 is out, so there's 4 left. So on those 4 other topics, I would say before you start a business, try to learn about that, because it's you need to be able to have maybe not 80%, but certainly between 50 and 80% of an understanding of these different areas if you want to be able to be a successful entrepreneur. So learn, and then the financing side is you have to have very good forecasts, very realistic forecasts. The money is the most stressful part of being in a business, especially at the beginning. So if you can have a good business plan, good investors, be very, very careful with money. Don't spend too much. Try to respect your budget. It could work. But even if you do all of that well, 80 to 85% of businesses fail, right? So don't put all your eggs in that basket. Try to protect yourself, try to be safe, and try to give you a bit of try to give you a way out, where the way out is not that you lost all your money, you lost your home, and then you're left in the street, right? Try to be careful to place that in the context where you're actually going into something which has a significant amount of risk.
Thank you very much. There's a concept called affordable loss in this notion of effectuation that we were talking about, and what Carl was saying towards the end reminded me of that. So very interesting. Okay, time flies when we are having fun, I guess. There's only 8 minutes left, and I see Nelson's hand up. So final question or comment to Nelson, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, just had another question as you were sort of at the end of your previous response. I guess, thinking about what you do and what Simon does, I mean, from manufacturing to technology to events and bringing international acts, is there something that brings sort of you and your like projects together? Is there one sort of synergy that you sort of use as an evaluative tool to decide, all right, I want to go into this space, or I want to go into this industry, or because, right now it seems like, wow, you're doing so much. How are these things related?
Yes. So that's a very good point, right? You have to set a criteria in terms of what is good for your, I mean, especially at the beginning, as you can't do very much at the beginning, so you have to select that very well. For us, we found that it looks a little bit wide, but it's typically always either about digital display or electromechanical devices. So, and there's a link with entertainment, because entertainment actually, if you look at a project like, for example, when we did the projection systems for the Harry Potter pavilion, it's an entertainment project, really, right? So you have the entertainment team there talking with the creators and things, and then they were pushing it back to the electromechanical devices, sort of the moving 3D projectors, and you had, of course, there's LED displays. So there, and sometimes we fall into those sort of sweet spot projects where essentially we use all aspects of what we do well, but so for us, it's either digital display, electromechanical devices, or live content coming from right into China. But you have to understand that the live content company, which is called Relive, that's actually a totally separate entity, right? It's under us, but it's another company. It's got its management team. It's got its own sort of agenda. It's a very different way of operating, and whereas Simon is really more of an engineering office in the factory. So it's it could be almost said like it's two totally different businesses. It just happens to be under the same invested by the same person, if you want. But I still like the point of saying, that you need to have that. You need to be able to select what you do best, and then stick to that as much as possible as you're building essentially your company or you're trying to be successful.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So Carl, we've known each other for a few years now, and you've given many great talks to students, both from CEIBS and, in the past visiting students. But this is actually one of the most comprehensive, detailed discussions we've had. And I think it was truly very insightful. And I also remember during the Shanghai lockdown, you were still being so positive about the opportunities in China. I remember you were even saying, I'm seeing so many expats leave, but if any of them have businesses that they want to sell, I'd be interested. So
yeah, I'm bullish on China.
That gave me a lot of encouragement, that even though, as you said, there's a distinction between how bad things sound in social media and so on, and the reality of what pragmatic people are doing. Not to say that it's easy, but the picture is often not as dark as it seems, that there are people on the ground who are pragmatic and still working together. So thank you very much. This has been very great. And in recognition of your many times of helping us as a guest speaker, I wanted to, I know you got a recognition for your voluntary work from the local government, but I also wanted you to have a recognition from CEIBS. Oh. So last year we introduced this recognition of people who we call program learning mentor, in Chinese, 导师. And it's, a process of nomination. That's why I kept hassling you for your resume for a while. And both the deans approved of this and have signed this. So if we had met in person, I would have been very happy to present you with the certificate. but it shall come to you in the post. So thank you very much to our
Wow,
latest 课程实践导师. Thank you very
Wow,
much. Thank you.
that's a great honor. Well, thanks very much. I hope it's relevant. It's fun for me, so I just hope it's fun for you guys as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. So please join me in thanking Carl Bro. And thank you all for your participation and involvement over the past couple of days. I hope you have a good week ahead. We meet again on Thursday, by which time your individual assignments would have been done. And see if you can make a start also with your group assignments. Okay, thank you all. And thank you to Janice, Ella, Tracy, everybody who has supported, and our IT staff. Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks so much, Carl, once again.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.